So okay, so Tanya and her lasagna corner you and say,
Yes.
"Hey, we're doing this." How does she present the idea, and then also why is Zora? Why Zora and Me of all the historical figures you could go for? Why is she the one that you wanna incorporate?
So I think Tanya presented the idea to me because we were just very close friends. You know, the time that I worked at the agency, we just spent like 5 days a week, you know, from 9 to 5, basically chatting, you know, in between our actual jobs. So we just became really close and we really got to know each other's minds. And that was kind of part of the fun of working on the series, was having kind of a built-in audience. Your collaborator is really the person that you're writing to. So at the very beginning of this, I can't believe it now, we started before Google Docs, right? And
What year are we
because
talking that you're starting?
2005, maybe 2006. I can't believe it was so long ago. So we're starting before Google Docs, and Tanya tells me this idea, and you know, she has a background in anthropology, and you know, she's thinking, you know, she wants to put out there for kids of color, for all kids, for girls especially, this kind of spunky, take no prisoners girl detective. And because she has this background in anthropology, and most of Zora Neale Hurston's books are anthropological works. So if you went to a library and you had all Zora Neale Hurston books on a shelf, there would be more anthropological books than novels. So, you know, she's really read now, I think, more closely in anthropology classes, you know, than she had been previously. So, you know, so Tanya had this, you know, girl detective, anthropologists study human behavior. They study people, you know, they want to know what makes people tick. Zora. For me, on the other hand, my relationship with Zora Neale Hurston was as like the supreme prose stylist, you know, especially as someone who has a background in poetry. I had never really thought very much at all about Zora as an anthropologist, as this kind of detective of, you know, human behavior. I just thought of her as kind of like this master poet, sentence by sentence. So I think in that regard, we were a good pairing because our relationship to Zora was so different. So I think each of us brought those two perspectives to our actual books. The writing process, again, way back then, before Google Docs, you know, that night when Tanya told me her idea over lasagna, we just kind of hashed out the plot.
Of
And
one book or three?
of one. But see, then the trouble got started when we had to try to figure out what the other two books were about. So we just kind of hashed out the plot. I went home. I got my Zora Neale Hurston reader off the shelf. You know, for about maybe like the next month, I read a couple of Zora's novels. I read her autobiography, and I thought about it. And then I just started writing. So then I just wrote the manuscript and I just gave it to Tanya, and Tanya was like, "Hey, Vicky, like this kind of works." And then Tanya started rewriting it, added new characters, took stuff out, put in new scenes. And then we just went back and forth like that for a couple of months, just kind of trading a whole book. Now, of course, I think we would be in Google Docs together the whole time. You know, it wouldn't have been kind of this private relationship, you know, this private time that each of us had with the manuscript before we exchanged it. So I'm kind of grateful now for the way that that first book happened, because it was a really good experience for me just learning how to draft and then seeing the editing process go back and forth.
So are you and obviously you and Tanya remain close friends, best friends
Yeah.
forever. But was that a comfortable process that, hey, I've just had this wonderful experience, just me, just Zora and me, just having our wonderful time together. And now here comes Tanya who wants to edit and add characters and change things. Is there any friction there, or is it mostly a wonderful experience and you're grateful that she's improving the work?
Oh, that was great. It's a couple of weeks ago, my neighbor said, hey, wasn't it weird writing a book with someone? I'm like, no, if you find a smart person, write a book with them. That was great. Are you kidding? Yeah, no, it's like, it was made a billion times better. It's like I learned more about the writing process from being able to observe, all of the things that she added, took out. I learned so much from watching her work on that first early draft.
And are there parts of that first book that when you reread them, you can say, well, that part's clearly me, pat on the back. Oh, this part's clearly Tanya. I should write her an email and thank her again for what a wonderful job she did. Or have you both gone back and forth over it so much that it's hard to tell where she begins and you end, or however the best way to phrase that is?
Yeah, I don't, I'll be honest with you. I don't remember really writing anything in the book at this point. Like, I know that I did because I have, it's kind of like I can remember thinking through stuff. Like, I know that I did it. But I think after so much time passes, it's like I also have that experience with the summoner. Like, I can't even believe, like, I'm like, who wrote this? I guess I did. Okay, I guess I worked on it. I kept handing it in. So I think for me, there's so much kind of distance between what the thing becomes and who the person was that sat down and wrote it. It doesn't really seem like me or mine anymore. Though I do have memories of very specific passages that are kind of tied up in my own, kind of psycho-emotional world, but not very many.